The 2024 World Chess Championship continues. We're on to game 3 between Gukesh and Ding. The match score is currently 1.5 to half because Ding Liren won the very first encounter and we had a draw in game 2. So let's get into it. D4 was the first move of this game, and I think that was the shock already. I think personally, I expect that most of the players that ever participate in a world championship match for sure have the flexibility to play both D4 and E4. But, for you and even me watching this game, I only play, for the most part, one move. So the flexibility being shown here by Gukesh, who comes out with D4 after E4 in game number 1. Ding responds, knight F6. And from here we see knight F3, D5, the perfect opportunity here for the London system. Of course, not what he was trying to play. He goes for C4, a much more standard approach. And after E6, we really have the makings of just a queen's gambit declined here. Sometimes white has the knight on C3. Sometimes white starts with knight F3. In this case, we still see the exchange variation. C6 and queen C2. Queen C2, for those that don't know, is definitely aimed at a very particular move by black, and it'll be clear what that is in just a sec. But bishop to G5 followed by E3 is another good way to go about things because you want to develop the bishop naturally before you push that pawn. But there's a very important move for black that needs to be stopped, and that's bishop to F5. It's such a good diagonal. White wants to get the bishop to D3 first, but you're too slow with E3 and bishop D3, and you're even slower with the bishop going out to G5 first. So this stops bishop to F5, and then white wants to continue like this, and then basically all of white's pieces will be much better than their counterparts. So black plays G6. Stubborn. Says, okay, well, no, I actually want the bishop on F5. It needs to happen. And white's even more stubborn. Says, no, I'm actually now getting prepared to play G4. Who knows if it would happen, right away. But if we see this move against the queen is going to move, and then eventually the bishop is going to get kicked. So that's exactly what happens. The bishop goes to F5, queen B3, and this is very standard. Anytime you have this pawn structure here, and this goes for the London as well, because if you reverse the board, I should just flip it for 1 sec. This is pretty much the London system setup by black. We have the inclusion of G6, but this is basically the London. And in the London, you play queen B3. So here, naturally, black's going to play queen B6. So that's exactly what happens. And white decides to continue with the plan that we talked about here. Pawn to G4. This is a very unorthodox setup here by Gukesh, right? We not only have the switch to D4, but then we have the time spent on multiple queen moves in the opening, and H3 G4. This is all because if black achieves this bishop F5 move, the setup is just going to be so easy to play. So Gukesh is, and you can see based on the time usage, right? Only a minute down on the clock here for Gukesh. This is preparation. He intended to play pretty much everything that you're seeing here. Queen takes, pawn takes. Now we see a move that creates basically the struggle for the entire game. Bishop to C2. No, it was not necessary. The bishop could have retreated here, but that would sort of be a moral victory, if not a small victory on the board for white, getting the bishop to retreat, because then you can continue with all the moves that you want to. The bishop goes back. White develops maybe this bishop, plays E3, bishop D3. I personally think it's a nice position, but I don't think it's anything crazy. Okay, bishop C2 and bishop F4. So this is obviously a moment where bishop takes B3 needs an explanation. Curious if you guys have any thoughts about what you would play here, but this is a pretty well-known idea in this opening. So anytime that this pawn gets captured, white pretty much has the exact same response planned, and it will be the case here as well. Knight D2. Okay, knight D2 hits the bishop. There's only going to be one square available. Yes, you can retreat the bishop here, but this is the whole point of the opening. Now you're in trouble. Okay, the bishop can't retreat here, here, here. Clearly can't go here. So you've only got one square on e4, but I can take that away with the move f3. So the move g4, bishop c2 creates a position where white's actually now trying to trap the bishop, and black has to work on getting the bishop out. So bishop f4, we see the move h5. Black cannot take this pawn. If you go back to c2, we can see it's trapped. Bishop c4, on the other hand, white could just take it, play e3, reclaim this pawn next. If black goes about trying to protect it, this could get, from bad to worse. As we can see, huge problems here in the corner. So yeah, this is just not an option. Very, very dangerous to take this pawn on b3, which is why white can actually just leave it there and plays bishop to f4. So black plays h5, trying to rescue the bishop. Might be thinking, okay, how the heck does this rescue the bishop at all? But if I force white to play g5, right, the threat is to take. So even if I play rook c1, black can take, hitting my knight like this, and then rescue the bishop on f5. So because of that, I'm encouraged to play g5, but then that also hands over that square. So Gukesh decides to play the move rook g1, trying to maintain that pawn on the g4 square. Knight d7, a developing move at last. White plays knight d2, defending the pawn, and now you can see rook c1 and f3 is available to potentially trap that bishop. So black decides to play the move rook g8. Ding is trying to play g5. So this move looks like, what the heck is this all about? But by playing g5, hitting the bishop, you're actually creating an avenue that your bishop can be used, that can use to retreat. So this is actually a surprisingly good move, rook g8, even though it kind of looks very slow, very passive. I don't know. But a really interesting struggle. The entire game revolves around this bishop. How many times have you guys played a game where your opponent has like a queen, maybe they take one of your pawns, like b2 for example, and you've planned it out so like you don't think they should take your pawn, but they take it anyway, and you're like, hang on a sec, I think I can trap my opponent's queen here. And you spend your whole game, all your time thinking, trying to trap the queen and just trying to make sure you cover all the squares, and then you forget one square and you miss one move, and then the queen escapes, and you've spent all your time, all your effort, your position is ruined, pawn structure terrible. It's the worst feeling in the world. So it's funny that this world championship game revolves entirely around trapping this bishop, because I feel like if white's not successful, this could be a big problem. Now with the move g5 coming, white decides to commit g5 himself. Knight h5, bishop h2, rook h8, lining up on the bishop, but he doesn't care. Gukesh goes f3, intending e4, which would truly trap the bishop in on the c2 square. We see knight g7, uncovering an attack on the bishop. And here the move rook h5 was played, and this is probably the key moment of the entire game, entire position to talk about. Rook h5 is actually going to be a mistake here, and it's a mistake for a very specific reason that I'm about to show you. Now, the interesting thing about this position is the bishop can retreat. So absolutely not trapped, okay? Let's just say that clear. The bishop was not trapped on c2. It was not guaranteed to be trapped. The bishop can escape here to the e6 square. Now, granted, it's maybe not the move that you want to play. It allows e4, but you could retreat the bishop to e6 and play this position. Now, the game could get wild from here. I think white still has tremendous compensation. The knight's not great here, but my point is that the bishop was not trapped by force, so rook h5 was definitely a decision that Ding made. And Ding thought that he was attacking this pawn, and this is very clever. If the pawn defends like this, the bishop is very bad. That's a guaranteed exit square for the bishop now. But instead, Gukesh plays the move e4 instantly, and these moments are always quite tense at the chessboard, because when a strong player makes a move like this, and an equally strong player basically ignores it, somebody's wrong, right? That means this move either did not have the desired effect, or it did, and someone's miscalculated. So this line basically intends the move rook c1 to trap the bishop, right? That's all that's happening here. The bishop is behind enemy lines. So Ding decides to take, and yes, rook takes g5 can be played, but rook c1 would hit the bishop. So that wasn't what Ding was intending with this. If e4, I'm sure that Ding was prepared with knight e6, intention, knight takes d4. And this is exactly what I mean. When your game plan is all about trapping one piece, you kind of sacrifice the quality of your position just to get that piece. So if I play knight e2 here to defend this pawn, all of a sudden black plays bishop b4, and it's like I'm all out trying to trap this piece. Bishop d3 can be played. You have to be so careful. So instead, in order to defend this pawn, white doesn't defend it at all. Rook c1. This is exactly what happened in the game. Knight takes d4, defending the bishop. And now we see bishop to f2. Now, it looks like Ding is the one that actually calculates this out with bishop g7. Because if you take the knight, the bishop takes, hitting the rook on g1. Meanwhile, b3 pawn is also loose, so it can be taken. So this is exactly what I mean, where someone has made a mistake. And now we see a move that potentially Ding missed in his calculation here. The move knight e2. And I'm just going to pause it right here, right? Have a look at this position. I'm in shock that this is actually working. And this is all because of rook h5. That whole line that you just saw was forced because it's the only way to try to rescue this light squared bishop after the move e4. And the placement of the rook on h5 means that this whole line does not work. Look at this setup. White's better? White's winning here? That's crazy. Feels like black has every piece developed and white has absolutely none. This is one of the wildest positions I've ever seen for there to be a decisive advantage for white. Knight e2. What's the idea? Undermining the knight, clearly, which would then undermine the bishop. But you're probably thinking, okay, why can't we just take and then save the bishop? Well, after the bishop takes back, it hits that rook on the h5 square. It's crazy. So that rook h5 move led to all of this. There's no other way to go around this. You know, if the bishop moves, we just take the knight. There's no knight f3 check. So, I mean, have a look at this position yourself, but there's just nothing here. You can try to sack pieces for pawns, and that's exactly what Ding does here. Knight takes b3, but after rook c2, I mean, this doesn't need any explanation other than Ding's down a piece. So amazingly, this move knight e2, which on its own is definitely an impressive move, but connected with the whole combination and playing the move e4 in response to rook h5, when, by the way, before rook h5, the game was actually very balanced. Very balanced. Black even maybe slightly preferred by the engine. You can rescue the bishop here. You don't even need to. The engine might suggest the move where you leave the bishop there, but from the human perspective, you could rescue the bishop, and instead, Ding goes for the move rook h5, and it's punished by just a crazy calculation by Gukesh to play this. And then, I mean, Ding gives up the knight, but at this point, we're just watching the master at work here. Gukesh up a piece. Doesn't matter how good you play. As Ding at this point, he's down on time. He's been outcalculated, and yeah, I mean, at this point, he's kind of shuffling the king as well. We see the coordination from Gukesh, and we don't need to spend too much time on the end of this game. It was a slightly nice sequence at the end here, but truly child's play for someone of Gukesh's caliber. Bishop h3, f5, and bishop f4. White's got an extra piece, and in the final position, bishop takes f5. The resignation from Ding after his own move comes in because he realized bishop to f5 can be played, and there's nothing to do after this. If you take here, I'm going to throw in this with a check, and if you take here, I'm just going to grab that rook, and we're running out of moves. There's no rook takes because of the pawn takes. So that is just the end of the game, and we actually did see the resignation by Ding after the move rook h5, which is rare in chess, by the way, to resign after your own move. But anyway, besides the point, this was I wouldn't say this is a crush, but definitely that rook h5 move, a rare miscalculation by Ding is how I interpreted the move. Phenomenal by Gukesh to foresee some of that, because otherwise, rook h5 to target that g-pawn is a huge problem in the position. So for that move to be probably seen in advance by Gukesh, maybe in preparation or not, phenomenal stuff. And once again, we are reminded that this 2024 World Championship match is going to be the exciting one that was promised. We were all talking about the win by Ding to start things off, but what struck me as just incredible poise was the interview that I watched from Gukesh. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I watched the interview between the two players after the game, and Gukesh was answering some media questions, and he wasn't giving the typical chess answers, the non-answers where it's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna try my best for next game. you know, let's see what we can do. That's it. No, he was like, you know, it should be an interesting match now that I'm trailing. Yeah, you know, obviously, like, I was nervous for game one. Like, he was being really honest, and to me, that only happens from someone who's supremely confident in themselves. So when I saw that from Gukesh, I was not concerned that this was going to be some sort of blowout match or anything like that. This reaffirms it. Great game from Gukesh to bounce back. We now have wins from both players, which just sets things up for the next game. But there will not be a next game tomorrow. We have a rest day, which means you guys can catch the next recap at the end of the next round, which will be in a couple days from now. So I will see you guys for that one. But boy, do we have a phenomenal World Championship match on our hands. See you in the next video.